Bonjour, hello, hola. My name is Oscar Hernández, and I would like to talk to you about why I became a physics teacher and how that has led me to the most interesting question ever. I was born in Mexico City into a family of Spanish Civil War and World War II refugees. I loved my childhood in Mexico. It was colorful, it was fun, it was social, and it was full of surprises. One of the biggest surprises was the announcement that we're going to be living in Chicago. I don't remember how my sister felt, but I was full of questions. Can I bring my comic books? I had lots. Yes, we will take a trunk for your comic books and your favorite doll. How will we get from Mexico City to Chicago? We will take the bus. What about the language English? You will go to school and pick it up from your teachers and peers. We would take the bus, we would arrive in winter, we would get to see lots of snow, yay! We would get to live in a very small but very cute second floor apartment in Chicago's South Side with my grandparents. Yay! It all sounded exciting, like I was entering into a Three Stooges movie. I knew about the Three Stooges from watching TV, which I loved to do. It was the only English language program I remember watching in Mexico, and it was not dubbed, so I understood nothing. But that really didn't matter. One doesn't watch the Three Stooges for the dialogue. And I would pretend I did understand, and when we would play with my cousins, I would pretend I was speaking English by saying things like "rush, rush, 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 rush." Anyway, there in Chicago, I lived a stereotypical immigrant experience. For a comedic idea of what I'm talking about, there's this great Montreal movie, Mambo Italiano, or there's this other movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Living with my immigrant family was living in many worlds at once, very quantum mechanical, a foreshadowing of my future profession. The best moments were when our cousins from Mexico would visit, or when we would visit them. I went to school and eventually learned English, and then I found speaking Spanish in public embarrassing. And yet, as the oldest child, I became the family's official translator-interpreter. My mother never lost the very unmodern habit of haggling to get a lower price. I had to help her regatear, even if all we were going to do was buy a few tomatoes. So embarrassing, really. And when I would ask her why I would have to do that, she would ignore my questions and just continue bartering. So my parents worked in factories, my grandfather in a restaurant as a waiter, my grandmother stayed home to take care of us. My grandmother and I would see the exact same situation and evaluate it so differently. I could not understand how this could be true. This was true about small questions like, why am I being punished if my brother was the one who broke the egg? And it was true about big questions. What's so wrong for two men to love each other? Why would it be wrong if my girlfriend were black? My big questions got all the adults around me very nervous, very worried. And I was full of those big questions. I was interested in them. What exactly is life? What is the meaning of life? Is there really a God? And is she really that nice or is she mean? Is there really hell if we're naughty? What is good? What is evil? How can we get rid of evil and create utopia where everyone's going to be happy? I had dreams that I was Mighty Mouse. I should have been a big Marvel comic strip artist, but instead, I became a priest. I changed my mind by the end of high school. I needed consistent, I wanted to become a priest. I didn't become. I needed consistent answers for my questions, and everyone, school, home, friends, family, were going to give me completely different answers. I had this quest to find a moral meter stick which would measure the good and the bad. Education was important, so I applied to university and had the hope of making progress in that. At the same time, it was something that was going to make my parents proud, and it gave me a really good excuse to live my immigrant home, Chicago's racial unrest, and my priestly aspirations behind. I looked at art, philosophy, engineering, and then there was this discipline called physics that asked questions that seemed important and had surprising answers. And there was a way to verify if the answer was right. They called it an experiment. I ended up cheating a bit on this point and went towards thought experiments. The questions that physics asked were not moral questions, but still they were very interesting. What is time? What is space? How many layers to an onion? Or how many layers to an atom and its particles? If the universe started in a Big Bang, where did the Big Bang take place and when? And how can quantum mechanics be right if it says such silly things? I ended up going all the way and asking lots of why questions, enough to get a PhD in physics, and eventually I arrived in Montreal to work as a researcher at the universities McGill and UDM. The year was 1991. Then I left physics to work in human rights in Chiapas, Mexico, and then I returned to Montreal with a daughter. And when I came back, I still wanted to do physics, but in a more socially relevant way, not just research. So I decided that teaching was important, and that's why 20 years ago I became a Marianopolis physics teacher. Fast forward to today, and I teach physics and I do research in physics, and this discipline has me looking for the answers to questions like, what is dark energy? What is dark matter? Do cosmic strings exist? If so, how can I see them? Can I use artificial intelligence to see cosmic strings? Blah, 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 so forth and so on. But none of these are the most interesting questions ever. And in teaching physics, I would think about how I could make difficult concepts explained clearly. And to me, that was explain them how I would like them to be explained. And so I spent a lot of time trying to do this. And the students seemed to love these explanations. But then when I asked certain questions, I felt that my explanations and everything I had done would fall apart. For example, many years ago, I went up to one of the brightest students in my waves and modern physics class, and he really is one of the brightest students I have ever had. And I asked, why do astronauts float in the space station? And he responded, because there is no gravity. And his answer seemed so normal and understandable. We always hear on the radio and on programs how the environment of the space lab is a microgravity environment. But this isn't true. There's almost as much gravity in the space lab as on Earth. Astronauts float because they're in free fall, and they never reach the Earth's surface because the Earth's surface is curved and it's curving away from them. And this is what we call an orbit. So I asked myself, how can I get students to think in concepts and not formulas? How can I get students to be patient problem solvers? And that is when 15 years ago, I flipped my classroom and stopped just giving lectures. And yet still, these are not the most interesting question ever. For me, what qualifies as a most interesting question ever is not a why or a what is question. It is a how question. How do we arrive at a why question or a what question? How do we transform an answer from a why or a what question to the truth? Note that saying you can do an experiment is not really an answer because an experiment needs to be interpreted. And then even more, how can you even do an experiment on a theory of the universe when we only have one freaking universe? And even if the question is simpler than that, like, does the sun go around the earth or is it the other way around? How did we decide that? And how do we decide that? No movie has ever been made to show this, nor is it even possible to make such a movie. So how do we arrive as that being the truth? And where do ethical truths and solidarity and social justice fit into all this? That is why I feel the most interesting question is the how do we know or the how do we do question. The how do we interact with nature and society and develop our imagination and abstract thought into truths. The how questions allow us to formulate the why questions. The how questions are the journey. And the journey is the most important, is more important than the destination. I believe that what is important is not the final truth nor the utopia of a perfect society, but the process of working together in an equitable way. So how can we do that? So what is the most interesting question ever? Do you see that I cannot tell you, otherwise I would be going against my whole proposition that we need to pay attention to the process and not the answer? It would be like me lecturing you about not lecturing people. Do you see why learning which formula to use in a physics problem is entirely inconsequential? Thank you.